You're live. Ok. Got it. Olá, pessoal. Boa noite. É um prazer estar com vocês mais uma vez, hoje numa sessão especial, que, se depender de mim e do Marcos, se torna uma tradição, que é a nossa primeira sessão do ano, nosso primeiro meetup do ano, ser com o diretor da Hyperledger. Ano passado a gente teve o prazer de ter aqui o Brian, e esse ano a gente tem a Daniela, e eu acho que essa é uma questão muito legal de a gente poder promover. E hoje é dia 10 de fevereiro de 2022, nossa primeira sessão do ano, e não perdendo um pouco do nosso, da nossa forma de trabalhar, eu gostaria de dizer de uma maneira bem clara que esse é um grupo onde todos são bem-vindos, a gente trabalha para que todos se sintam bem aqui, que se sintam confortáveis e seguros. A gente tem o nosso código de conduta acerca de como a gente deve respeitar as pessoas, como a gente deve aceitar as pessoas como elas são, e a gente aqui da liderança do capítulo, a gente vai fazer tudo o que for necessário para que esse código de conduta seja seguido da melhor maneira possível, tornando esse um espaço democrático e livre, livre para discussões. Assim como a gente também tem uma regra de antitrust que a gente segue e que a gente também trabalha para que seja garantido dentro do capítulo, para que as relações entre companhias não tenham nenhum tipo de conflito de interesse, nenhum tipo de conflito em geral. Tá ok? É muito importante frisar que essa sessão está sendo transmitida ao vivo no YouTube, assim, caso você não consiga assistir ela por inteiro, ela vai estar disponível no canal da Hyperledger. Assim que for encerrado, você pode retomar do ponto onde você parou. Só deixando aqui, eu quero ser bem breve, avisando que a nossa próxima reunião do capítulo, a próxima reunião administrativa do capítulo está prevista para o dia 28/2 às 18h30, horário de sempre, reforçando que nossas reuniões quinzenais foram transferidas para mensais, para que a gente possa mixar com meetups e uma série de outros eventos que a gente tem. Todos são muito bem-vindos, a gente teve uma reunião muito boa no final de janeiro, uma série de ideias estão sendo trabalhadas e eu acredito, assim como eu acredito que todos que estiveram na reunião também tiveram a mesma sensação, que a gente vai ter um ano muito produtivo, com bastante coisa para desenvolver. Tá ok? Nesse momento eu gostaria de passar a palavra para o Marcos, que vai apresentar um pouco mais da nossa convidada, e eu só queria dizer, Daniela, mais uma vez, muito obrigado pela sua presença, é uma satisfação tê-la aqui, é uma felicidade para todo o capítulo poder contar com a sua presença. Obrigado.
É um prazer. Obrigada.
Mais uma vez, obrigado. Como comentei antes, essa sessão vai ser feita em inglês, então essa é a última vez que vocês vão me ouvir falar em português. So welcome everyone. Really appreciate everybody that's participating at our meetup. We, first of all, a little information. After the presentation of our speaker, we will have some Q&A panel. So whatever questions you might have, please write at the chat, the Zoom chat, that I myself and Renato are going to repass all the questions you might have. Today's speaker is such a special person. It's really a pleasure having her with us this evening. I think the first time I spoke to her was in 2018. She helped me when I was beginning my journey with Hyperledger Fabric, and probably helped lots of other companies and startups building their platforms using open source Hyperledger artifacts that are available all around the world. She was born in Portugal, graduated with her master's degree at School of Library and Information Science at Rutgers University. She is former Dow Jones Senior Business Developer and the actual General Manager of Healthcare Identity at Hyperledger Foundation, and also actual Executive Director at Hyperledger Foundation. Daniela Barbosa, thank you so much being with us tonight.
Obrigado. É um prazer estar aqui hoje à noite. E se vocês virem, o meu nome é Daniela Barbosa, eu sou portuguesa, nasci em Lisboa e quando tive 10 anos mudei para os Estados Unidos. E sou americana, vivo aqui em São Francisco agora, falo um pouco português, por causa que falo português em casa, com a minha família, os meus amigos, e cada vez que vou a Portugal. E com boa sorte, também quando for ao Brasil, posso usar o meu português com vocês. Mas hoje eu vou falar inglês para dar o update do Hyperledger Foundation, mas é um prazer estar aqui hoje à noite com vocês e eu quero ouvir de vocês o que é que precisam também para ter para ter a good experience with Hyperledger. So, Marcos, Renato, thank you so much. Muito obrigado. E I'm going to share my screen. Ok. Vocês podem ver o meu screen?
Podemos já ver, sim.
Muito bem. Ok. So, outra vez, obrigado, e I'm very, very excited about today's presentation from the Brazil Regional Chapter. First, I'd like to say that without our regional chapters and our meetup community around the world, Hyperledger would not be able to achieve what we have in the last 6 years. And I want to highlight what, as a community, we were able to do in 2021. We had over 135 virtual meetups. These were around the world, as you see in the dots, all over the world, in 12 different languages. Em português, aqui no Brasil, em espanhol, italiano, polaco, alemão, chinês, japonês. Really, and it really makes a difference when, as a community, we are able to talk to our developer community, our member community, the companies that are implementing using Hyperledger technology na língua franca que eles falam todos os dias. And I like to pause here, and I like to thank David Boswell, who many of you know. And David, if you could, I don't know if you're on camera, if you can wave. David Boswell is our Senior Director of Community Architecture. He's been on my side, by my side, as part of the Hyperledger Foundation staff for many years. And he really has helped our global community focus on the regional chapters, on the regional meetups that we have, and really making sure that as we put resources forward, we understand that languages, regional time zones, everything is really important. So David, a big thank you to you for what you accomplished last year in 2021, but really across the entire community in bringing an inclusive community to us. So for those of you who know David, thank you, David.
Thanks for saying that. I mean, I really enjoy working with everybody. So thank you to everybody in the Brazil community for doing everything you do too. I mean, I wouldn't have if there weren't meetup organizers doing things in their local community, I wouldn't have anything to do.
And yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about investments and kind of resources that we want to put together. The other person I'd like to highlight, who should also be on the phone, on the line, is Karen Atoni. E a Karen, vocês muitos também sabem, a Karen é brasileira, fala português também. And when I asked Karen, when Karen came into the team, when I first saw Karen and we started talking about bringing her into the team, I really knew that one of the things that she could help with was our region, our Brazilian region as well. So Karen, do you want to say hello?
Yes, hi, oi, tudo bem? Muito obrigada, Daniela, e obrigada à comunidade que sempre está vindo e apoiando o Hyperledger.
Obrigada. Mas, without the support of the regional chapter leads, vocês e nós não podíamos estar aqui. So, eu quero primeiro dar minha congratulations ao Renato Teixeira e ao Marcos Saraias. No ano 2021, o Regional Meetup do Brasil foi o que teve mais meetups. No globe inteiro, around the world, the regional chapter for Brazil did the most meetups. And I think, I have watched many of the meetups, and I know Karen and David have attended many as well. And it really is actually, your regional meetups are fantastic. So, Renato, Marcos e todos vocês que estão aí no Regional Meetup do Brasil, muito obrigado pelo vosso trabalho. And thank you. So, Thank you very much. So I want to talk a little bit about when I took over as executive director in October from Brian Bellendorf, who's really been a leader in our community since 2016. I've been here at Hyperledger since 2017, working alongside Brian and then Karen and David as we built our staff and our resources around the world. We had been getting feedback from the community that we as Hyperledger, as a project, needed to be bigger and needed to really focus on what the foundation is today in 2021 or in 2022 versus what it was back in 2016, which was a smaller project that had in the beginning Hyperledger Fabric and then Hyperledger Sawtooth, and a smaller community that didn't have as many of the outputs, the regional chapters, the meetups, the special interest groups. So we thought, and the feedback from the community, for those of you who potentially assisted us in the task force that we did over the summer, that changing the name to Hyperledger Foundation, it wasn't just a branding exercise, but really to talk about what the Hyperledger Foundation is as part of the greater goals that we have here at Hyperledger. So I thought it would be good to highlight what makes the foundation unique and what is it that we're looking for. So as a reminder, for those of you who don't know, perhaps that might be new to Hyperledger, we are part of the Linux Foundation. And the Linux Foundation for the last 20 years has really been developing and launching and supporting open source technology projects, anything obviously from the Linux kernel, which got its name from Linux Foundation got its name, to other innovative technologies, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, where Kubernetes sits, automotive grade Linux, which is where our automotive Linux operating system sits, and many more. We have new projects, for example, in 3D gaming, in energy, and edge and telecom. And really the goal is to bring together communities of companies and developers who are developing open source code and having that committee, those communities come together and develop and build a commercial adoption of those. So part of what we do here at Hyperledger is following in the steps of the Linux Foundation in order to do that. We find that in order to have the open source communities, we need to be neutral and collaborative in how we present that. So we are always open to anyone who wants to participate, who wants to contribute anything from code to being a subject matter expert from a business perspective, that want to produce open source code, that want to contribute code, that maybe companies or individuals who have code and want to build a community around it can easily bring in to the Hyperledger Foundation through, for example, our labs, their code projects and their communities that we can help grow. And obviously, open source and is very important to remain a vendor neutral, to make sure that these code projects and staff and our community as a whole work really hard to make sure that when these open source projects are made available, that there's not one vendor that oversees it. So we're very proud of what we've done over the last few years with all our projects there. And obviously that we follow a lot of the industry standards and put those industry standards forward. When we started thinking about what is the Hyperledger Foundation, the Hyperledger projects, everyone knew Hyperledger Fabric, Hyperledger Sawtooth, Hyperledger Indy, all these projects, but we're much greater than the projects themselves. We are a community of regional chapters like the Brazil Regional Chapter. We are a community of special interest groups like the Climate Action Special Interest Group or the Telecom Special Interest Group, who are really building not only the enterprise grade open source software that companies and governments can use and understand that it's been developed in an open, neutral way, that it has specific requirements from a security perspective, for example, but really a community backing up that code and those projects. So we're really a diverse ecosystem of technology projects and use cases and different industry leaders. Just very quickly, many of you have probably seen the Hyperledger momentum slide. This is something we like to keep track of to see the momentum. And it's not just about the numbers, but it's about the people and the communities behind these numbers that really make a difference. So Hyperledger as a project, we've been here for 6 years, and we now have multiple types of libraries, and I'll review those in a little bit. So we have 3 libraries, 7 tools, 5 distributed ledgers, and 6 graduated projects. And what you've seen over the last year is that we really have worked very closely with the maintainer community to understand the project lifecycle of these projects, so that we can describe and understand how the projects within the Hyperledger landscape are being developed and where they're going towards. So we do have a new lifecycle that we are not only supporting, but promoting as well. We continue to be a very global community of members, but more importantly, there are over 81,000 participants. How many people are on the phone today? Let me see. What do we got number here? 27. There's 27 of you here on the phone today, but overall there's 80,000 people in just our meetup communities, which are regional chapters and all the local meetup communities. So we have momentum. We have a lot of opportunities for us to work with the community. Our project landscape, this is our graduated projects and our incubating projects that we now have. And I would recommend, and maybe, you know, as a follow-up to the session, we can have a working session around the project life cycles and to really understand how projects come from labs, for example, and move into being incubating projects and graduated projects. And if we have questions for this later on, I'd be happy to talk about, and then I'll talk about some of these projects a little bit later on. For example, we're going to continue growing projects and really bringing in the best technology and the best communities into the Hyperledger Foundation that are bringing tools and libraries and DLTs that support where Hyperledger and the enterprise blockchain industry needs to go. And I'm very proud of what we've done over the last few years, bringing in projects, for example, like Hyperledger Brazil, which is really tied into the Ethereum ecosystem, but projects like Hyperledger Brazil that came from the community, that came from individuals and companies who are building these solutions for their customers, for government projects they might be working on, and bringing that in. So Hyperledger Brazil is our newest project. It's a tool that helps developers quickly set up and deploy secure, scalable production networks. And there's a lot of interesting work there, and we encourage you to get involved and participate in that as well. There's a great blog post. We'll make these slides available for everybody with the links to have. But ultimately, you know, I can put a lot of slides up with lots of great numbers and our momentum and how we grow. But we're here, you know, especially staff, you know, Karen, David, myself, and the others that are on staff are really here to help support the global community. And today we have a global community and we need to provide many different types of events and resources. I remember, and Mario, I don't know if you were there, but in I think it was 2018, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong or not, but when we did the Brazil boot camp, is that 2018? I think it must have been 2018.
You're mute, Karen.
Yes,
Oh,
it was 2018.
Sorry, I think it was 2019. I think it was 2019. June 2019.
Yeah.
So in 2019 was the last time that we as staff were there in Brazil. And I want to go to, Karen and I talk about this all the time. We need to get back there. We need to get to Latin America as a whole. But obviously due to COVID and travel restrictions, that's been a little bit harder. But in 2019, we did have a boot camp and I think it was very well received. And I know many of you and others who are active participants participated. But over the years, over the last 2 years since COVID started in 2020, we've had to find different ways to present, different options. So I want to highlight a couple of things that I think are exciting, and I'd love to make sure that everybody's aware of, that you can leverage. One thing, and David Boswell has really been helping lead these initiatives, is these community training events. So we had some workshops in January and February. In January, we did Hyperledger Aries, and in February, we did Hyperledger Indie. These were workshops that were done for the community. Anyone could attend. It was free to attend. And the feedback has been really great, and we want to do more of these. And we're even talking to some of the regional chapters about doing them in local languages as well. So how can we bring these type of community trainings and workshops to our global audience in different languages? And you'll see more of that coming from the Hyperledger Foundation in 2022 and 2023 to make sure that our global audience is addressed. For example, we have another upcoming training session that is going to happen in March. And this is building your own NFT auction app with Hyperledger Fabric, free to attend. Recommend that you, if you're interested, you go ahead and register. And these are the kind of things that, as staff and the foundation look to invest in things that help the communities, we want to create more of. So we're always happy to get feedback on what works, what doesn't work, and what are the things that as a community, you in Brazil, for example, would like for us to focus on as well. But virtual events are great, and we miss seeing everybody face to face. Some of you were there for the March 2020 Hyperledger Global Forum, which happened in Phoenix, Arizona. And that was the last time many of us got together. When we all went back home after that first week in March, we shut down. Pretty much the world shut down for March 2020 to things are hopefully opening up soon again around the world. And we know that each region is different, and we want to be respectful of that as to when people can start traveling and that we can get together in person. But eu quero tanto ver vocês todos em pessoa. But we are proud. This is a pre-announcement. We'll be announcing this at the end of February. So you are the first regional chapter and the first region that we've told this. But we are happy to announce that we will be meeting together for the Hyperledger Global Forum in September. And that will be in Dublin, Ireland. So we hope that some of you can plan to be there. Our CFP will open in the early March timeframe. So our call for presentations, and we do hope that many of you will submit talks. We will have some virtual streaming of the show. We're working out the details, but it will be an in-person event. A couple other things that I want to just highlight to make sure that everybody's aware of is we are constantly trying to find ways to engage with both the developer community that works on the project, so the maintainers and the contributors that are working on the different projects that we have, and also how do we recruit new developers, new contributors to Hyperledger Foundation and to the projects that you all rely on. So one of the things that we fund, and we've been funding for the last 4 years, is our Hyperledger mentorship program. And this is a great opportunity for those of you who want to be mentors, who want to bring new developers in the Brazilian community forward. And the mentorship program for the mentors, you get a mentee and sometimes 2 mentees per project, depending on what the project is. And the mentees, so the interns themselves, we call them mentees, but the interns themselves, it's a paid internship. So they get paid to work with you, to create, to do the project that you put forward. So please, if you have projects associated with Hyperledger that you want to maybe get some assistance on, if you have communities in Brazil, for example, if there are communities of women developers that you would love to reach out to and say, hey, Hyperledger has a paid mentorship program that the developers can participate in, please speak to Karen, myself, or David Boswell. We would love to talk to those local organizations and see how we can get them to bring mentees to us to bring new people into our community. And I would love to see, we have 21 different internships this year, mentorships open. I would love to see a large majority, a large part of those come from Brazil ecosystem. So please do get in touch with us, and we want to be able to do that. Other things that we do is we help support the community. When the community wants to do something, when the community wants to do activities, this Hyperledger Challenge for this year has started. If you go to challenge.hyperledger.org, this is a community-led event. Our Hyperledger India chapter, our Hyperledger Social Impact SIG, I know that our Latino America regional chapter is also getting involved. There is ways for us to use what the community wants to do and help promote this. And this one also, the challenge has mentees and mentors, and you can participate in that as well. And we're happy to answer any questions that you might have on the challenge and the mentorship as well. So I wanted very quickly, and I have a couple of slides, and I don't want to spend any more time on too many slides, because I do want to hear from everybody on the phone your questions. And what are the things that we should be looking at for the region in 2022 and 2023? We have to start planning for our future as well. But I want to talk about just enterprise blockchain in general and where we see the market and why we're so bullish specifically on enterprise blockchain technologies. Obviously, blockchain right now in the news and crypto and NFTs, everybody is, interested in what's going on in the blockchain space. I talk to people all the time and I say, hey, our community at Hyperledger, whether it's the media or big companies that I talk to, we've been working on these technologies for years, for 6-7 years, many of us even longer. So how do we move that forward in the enterprise space? And the good news is in Deloitte's 2021 blockchain survey space is that the percentage of the respondents back there that said that blockchain is ready for production, it's scalable, it has achieved mainstream adoption. We no longer have to do those blockchain 101 conversations as much as we used to in 2017, is that it's here. So, 81% said, it is here. And even our own survey, we did a survey in the summer of 2021, showed the same thing. And we interviewed about 250 business and IT survey respondents, and they saw that 87% saw that blockchain technology was growing rapidly or moderately for their business of things that they do. So we do feel bullish. We do want to further invest in the projects and the communities that we're building, because we know that what we've been building for the last 6-7 years, is coming to fruition. And there's a lot of hype and lots of things that maybe we're not involved with, but there's lots of things that from a technology perspective, we have the experts, we have the community, and more importantly, we have the enterprise business use cases that use Hyperledger technologies as well. And obviously open source, I talked a little bit about why the Linux Foundation and why Hyperledger as an open source project is so important. But overall, people say, when I build using blockchain technology, it needs to be open sourced. We are having conversations across the board with government agencies, with central banks, with large companies who understand that in order to build blockchain networks and blockchain solutions, it needs to be open source. It needs to be multi-vendor. It needs to be something that the community can trust and govern together. So we're very excited that at Hyperledger, that's exactly what we've been doing for the last 7 years. From application categories, what the focus that we've had on those top 3 at the top, financial services, supply chain, and identity, continue to be the categories that rank the highest from an adoption perspective. But I want to highlight that there are things on the bottom that are really important for our communities. And we're doing so well at the top that let's focus on the bottom part of this, of application categories where there is the most growth potential for us in 2022 and 2023. In media and entertainment, we just launched our media entertainment group just launched a subgroup around gaming. There's a lot of interesting work, and there's organizations out there already using Hyperledger in gaming applications that we know of. Mobility and transport, obviously, as logistics and other types of mobility opportunities, and social impact and nonprofit. And we will, here at the Hyperledger Foundation, be focusing on these initiatives as we move into 2020 and 2023, 2022 and 2023. But once again, lots of opportunities. Just this week, the Forbes Blockchain 50 came out. This is an annual survey that they do for large Fortune 500 companies. And the Blockchain 50 for the last 3 years has continuously shown Hyperledger as a leading enterprise blockchain DLT. This year, once again, we have Hyperledger Fabric being the one, the enterprise DLT that's mostly adopted, and there was 13 mentions of Hyperledger Fabric. But we were also very happy to see Hyperledger Brazil, Hyperledger Cactus, and Hyperledger Indy in the self-submitted. These are companies who submit to Forbes and get interviewed by Forbes around how they're using blockchain, and Hyperledger continues to be in the forefront of that. Hyperledger Fabric, however, still continues to be the most adopted from an enterprise perspective. And this summer, Block Data, which is a third-party firm, did an independent study across the top 100 companies. So these were the top revenue companies, top 100 revenue companies. And they evaluated 30 different technologies. You only see a couple on the screen, but they evaluated 30 different blockchain technologies. And of those technologies, Hyperledger Fabric was the most preferred DLT of those top 100 companies. And there was 26% of them currently use Hyperledger Fabric. The Ethereum stack here, we know that there is some Hyperledger Brazil in there, and even in the Consensus Quorum, because Consensus Quorum is the consensus brand that has Go Quorum, as well as Hyperledger Brazil on that. So even in these three categories, there's a lot of Hyperledger use cases. But once again, Fabric, by far, the most adopted from an enterprise space that we see over and over again. I'm not going to go through this. We'll provide these slides. I really want to save the time for conversation. But the slides do have, highlights around trade finance and central bank digital currencies, and where we're seeing a lot of opportunities of growth. And more importantly, the thing is, I'm here today and we're here talking about production implementations. It's no longer about POCs or different MVPs. These are production implementation. TradeLens has recorded just last year over 42 million container shipments using the TradeLens blockchain platform, which is Hyperledger Fabric. So once again, these things scale. These things are in production. These things are used. And we should be proud that that's what we've built over the last 6 years here at Hyperledger. The CBDC topic, central bank digital currencies, for those of you who might not know the CBDC abbreviation, continue to be an important element of where our Hyperledger community is working on. And this is just a representation of all the central banks that are looking at Hyperledger, building both production and MVPs and pilots using Hyperledger technologies. And we see Hyperledger Fabric, Hyperledger Brazil, and Hyperledger Roja continue to be leading technology stacks that are used. And we have conversations with the central banks and different entities around the world, and they continue to tell us that open source is a priority for them, and that Hyperledger is a leading contender in all their DLT discussions. So we're very proud of that, of what the community has done. We are about to publish an ebook that highlights all the Hyperledger and central bank digital currencies. Karen Tony, who's here today, she has been leading our CBDC initiatives, working with our members and our community to really understand how Hyperledger is being used and the things that we need to focus on for the future of payments around the world. So please be on the lookout for that, and we'll announce that soon. Supply chain provenance continues to be a large part of what we do. And once again, I'll share that with you. And identity. So making sure that the projects specific to digital identity continue to be funded. With the workshops that we did in January and February really focused on bringing in new developers and contributors to that community. And there's a lot of great work happening around the world, in Europe, in Canada, in the Americas, and in Asia Pacific as well. And they all are leading with Hyperledger technology, Hyperledger ND and Hyperledger Aries, which is just amazing to see that the future of digital trust is being built by the Hyperledger Foundation projects. We have lots of case studies. I encourage you to go take a look on our website. Just last year, we published 10 of them, and we have many more that are already in the queue. And this is just a great way for yourselves to learn about how people use the technology. But more importantly, when you talk to your bosses, your managers, or when you talk to your customers, that you can point to use cases in production of using Hyperledger technology. So please do take a look at those in our website. So I'm going to pause right there. Because I know we're 20 minutes after the hour, and I really want to go through the questions and see, you know, I encourage everybody to turn on their video so I can see everybody. That would be nice. I miss people. I sit in my office by myself and I miss everybody. But I want to encourage everyone, and I know there's some questions. So, okay. Karen, do you want to help me with the questions, or maybe Marcos or Renato?
I can help you. I can help you here. First of all, before we do have one question here from Magno Cavalcanti, but before I have a question of my own about about Hyperledger Labs. You know, Hyperledger Bevel has just been released as a consequence of Hyperledger Labs. I'd like to hear from you some of our thoughts about Hyperledger Labs and what's next.
Sure. So Hyperledger Labs is really, I think, a shining star of what we've done over the last 2 years to help developers who want to build, community and bring their code into Hyperledger, be effective and be successful. Hyperledger Cactus came through the labs as well, and that was a project that community members existing that were working on Fabric and Sawtooth and Bezu came together on. And our goal is to low barrier, right? So if you look at the Hyperledger Lab process, it is a low barrier entry point, right? You need an Apache 2 license. It needs to be obviously blockchain related, right? But it's a place that you can bring in the lab, and we help support that. And I'll pass it over to David in a little bit, and he can talk a little bit about how we support inbound labs. We help support the labs, but more importantly, we give you a community. We give you amplification to join all the other developers around the world who might be interested in working on that. There's a couple of very interesting labs. Bevel is one of them, right? It came in as a lab, it built a community, and now it went into the project, it went to the technical steering committee and went to the but we do a lot of work. We did a lot of work with Bevel, and David could attest to that. But we do a lot of work with the labs to have access to community tools, whether it's making sure that they can present at meetups, for example. And Marcos and Renato, you probably have hosted some of those labs in your meetups, right? That they can come and present the work that they do. So yeah, but what specific, like what things do you want to specifically talk about the labs? Because maybe we can address those specific questions.
The labs are just something so interesting that has just evolved lots of the Hyperledger projects, and some of them are really great. I'm really willing to see what's next and see if there are some news about next projects. But let's continue for the next question here.
So, but I'll give you an example, and Karen, maybe you can speak to that. So one of the things that we as staff and as a community, we really care about is nurturing the special interest groups, for example, right, who are working on, they have specific charter to work at, sector specific opportunities, right? So whether it's climate action or capital markets. So recently, the capital markets special interest group put forward, working with Vipin, who is the chair of that, put forward a lab, which is a very interesting, NFT related lab, right? So as we think about, Web3 and where Hyperledger is going on that. Karen, maybe you can talk a little bit about how that process happened and.
Yeah, so it's actually the second lab that the SIG has done. So previously there was the eTaler lab, which is a CBDC implementation of Besu. The community benefits from Vipin being a longtime community member. But, really it's about bringing people together who want to see something happen in a certain use case. Like Daniela mentioned, it's very easy, very low barrier way to start a project. We do provide some support there. And the special interest group is an avenue for bringing people together to talk about that and bring interest in people to participate in it as well. Discuss what ways to move forward, what needs to be built. And then from there, it can continue and some even, grow enough into becoming a project. I know that some of the SIGs that David has supported have also started some labs as well. And that's just one technical thing that the SIGs do. Some of them have done white papers and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And David, maybe you can talk a little bit about and use the climate action special interest group as an example of how they actually brought labs, and they also took advantage of the mentorship program to help those labs move forward.
For sure, and I'm just going to grab their lab link real quick and drop that here. But it is an example of how, ideally, all these pieces fit together and complement each other. So if this group is interested in any of the things that are already happening or interested in starting your own efforts, we can certainly help you with that. But as Daniela said and Karen referenced, many of the SIGs do end up choosing to do some sort of a technical project. In particular, the climate accounting lab, climate accounting SIG started the lab that I just dropped in the chat. It's called the Blockchain Carbon Accounting Project. And it's really interesting. And they've done some stuff with Aries and Cactus as well. They're looking about how to track carbon emissions on multiple ledgers and how do those ledgers talk to each other. So, as Daniela said, they wanted to do something we wanted to make it easy for them to do that. So the labs is a low barrier way where they threw up a repository and they started doing stuff together and talked about it in the SIG call. And so hopefully, the pieces are there if there are people, in the community who are wanting to make use of them. So yeah, if there's more interest in starting a lab or connecting with an existing lab, certainly let us know.
Okay.
That's great. That's great. Let's continue with the next question. The next one is such a Brazilian question from Magno Cavalcanti. Magno is a frequent member from Brazilian community, such a skilled technical guy for Hyperledger Fabric, and now he's asking about the certification price, because this is something interesting me as well, because I have to confess something. Once I applied for a Hyperledger Fabric administration exam and I failed. All my team is certified and I'm not, and so he's asking if it is possible to reduce the prices for the Brazilian community and the Indian community, to make it better for us.
Yep. Totally understand. It's a conversation that David and I have had actually many times on this subject. And one of the things that we are putting together, and David, I don't know if you have some details that you can share with them, is working with the Linux Foundation training and education team. So our certifications, there's a cost associated with the proctoring, for example, right? There's hard costs. When you took the test, Marcos, right? There was somebody that that was there for the test. There is hard costs associated with the training and certification. But what we're looking into is how can we sponsor community members, people who are part of our community, and provide reduced fees or free certifications. David, do you want to maybe hit upon that for us?
Yeah, and I mean, absolutely. As you said, I mean, this is something that is important. And I know that we're looking for alternatives as well that are available at no cost. I mean, as Daniela shared earlier, these workshops will hopefully also be a helpful learning resource that are available to people at no cost. But also, as Daniela said, there are some costs, involved. And so with the certifications, but, we have in the past for some activities in the community offered some sort of discounts. I think we can definitely do that again this year. I know, for example, with the Hyperledger Challenge that was referenced earlier, part of the prizes involved in that will be, free certification. So if there are activities or things that the Brazil community is interested in organizing, perhaps we can look at providing discounted or free certifications as part of that.
Okay, that's great. Great to hear. Following the questions, I'd like to address something. In the beginning, there was kind of a segregation from the public blockchain community, especially cryptocurrencies and stuff, and of course the DLT and blockchains like Hyperledger Fabric. But right now we can see projects like Hyperledger Brazil, and at the 2021 Hyperledger Global Forum, we could see Vitalik Buterin there. Would you say that's where Hyperledger Foundation is getting closer and closer to the cryptocurrency and crypto and token public blockchain community? So
it's been an ongoing thing, right? So, and I'll give you kind of the timeline. In 2018, the Hyperledger at the time was the project, right? Hyperledger started working with the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, right, the EEA. And shortly after, we actually started working with the Ethereum Foundation because we knew that the ecosystem was growing, right? Back to the point when I started my discussion, we all here have been in blockchain technology for a long time. And we've always said that it's a continuum of private permissioned to permissionless blockchains, right? In 2019, in August of 2019 was when Hyperledger Brazil came into the Hyperledger community as a project. Many people don't know that. Many people don't know that Hyperledger Brazil is an Ethereum mainnet client, right? You can run Hyperledger Brazil on mainnet or as a private permissionless blockchain network. And even prior to Hyperledger Brazil, we had the Hyperledger Burrow project, who many of you might know as well. And the Hyperledger Burrow, what that brought was the EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine. And that was in our projects in 2017. So we've always had, specifically to Ethereum, we've always had Ethereum-based projects and developers understand that the Ethereum ecosystem was an important one. Specifically for optionality, long-term optionality in blockchain use cases. If you take a look at Hyperledger Cactus, and just this week, last week we published a very in-depth post. Karen, if you can actually pull that post and put it on the Slack channel, on the chat, that would be great. A whole post around Hyperledger Cactus and its approaches to interoperability across chain. And there you'll see Hyperledger Fabric being addressed, right? Hyperledger Brazil being addressed. Hyperledger Corda, R3's Corda, and also Polkadot. And there's some work going on with Cosmos as well. There's also a lab called UI, and UI is for the IBC, which is the inter-blockchain IBC, which is the Cosmos, and they have a plugin. So interoperability and cross-chain and public and permission chain interoperability is key. So I encourage everyone to take a look at that blog post that we just published, because it really outlines where we believe the future of enterprise blockchain continues to go.
Really nice hearing that.
Mm-hmm. And you'll hear a lot of the word optionality for me, right? It's
Sure.
being modular, being able to have modular approaches that we can plug and play these things into different environments. But the optionality is when, many companies, 6 years ago, or even last year, would not even imagine, putting some, doing, participating or putting something in the public blockchain. And that has changed, and we know that. So NFTs, for example, there are NFT solutions out there that use Hyperledger Brazil. The Palm NFT is one of them. They're the ones that did the Damien Hirst, the currency, which was an NFT auction for Damien Hirst's art pieces. It's a fantastic project. They auctioned off 10,000, or they sold 10,000 virtual NFTs, and behind each NFT is an actual piece of art by Damien Hirst. And in 1 year's time, at the end of that, people are going to have to make a decision whether they want to keep the digital NFT or the art, the physical art. And each person who bought one, and now it's being traded on the market, will have to choose. Do I want to burn the digital NFT, or do I want to burn the physical art paper? And Damien Hirst is a big artist. I would want a Damien Hirst on my wall, honestly, virtual or not. And that's Palm NFT. They also did the DC Comics NFT drop and Space Jam, and they have a couple other very large NFTs. That is using Hyperledger Brazil. From an environmental perspective, they're actually seeing a lot of interest because of that as well.
Really nice to hear. Actually, our next meetup is gonna be with Public Mint. That's a token that uses Hyperledger Brazil. So that's great to see how it's going to happen. The next question, also from Magno Cavalcanti, is he's asking if it's possible to include in the Hyperledger Global Forum a track to promote scientific research in blockchain technologies that use Hyperledger frameworks.
Yes, Magno. There is a category for academic CFP submissions. The other thing, we just yesterday announced that we have a new Chief Technology Officer at the Hyperledger Foundation. So I am very pleased to say that Hart Montgomery, who has been a technical steering committee member for the last 6 years, the whole project runs. So Hart Montgomery is coming over. His start date is on Monday as our CTO. What's relevant to this is that Hart has an academic background. He comes from cryptography. He has a PhD at Stanford from the cryptography department and an undergrad in mathematics at Princeton. So he's definitely got a big brain, bigger than me. But one of the things that Hart and I have been talking about is how do we reach out more into the academic community. So Magno, do you work at one of the universities in Brazil?
No, but I am in a company that works in producing oil and gas, but we have a relationship with academic institutions in Brazil, and use to explore this research. I intend to start my doctorate after master of class that I did last year, and is interesting. I saw many papers in the world, but how many of these papers are using Hyperledger platforms to discover and to research technologies in blockchain? I don't know. It's a good platform using Hyperledger Global Forum to promote academic research, like, for example, the Journal of British Blockchain Community.
I agree. I agree, and you'll see more focus on that. There's a lot of papers out there using Hyperledger Fabric, but we don't actually promote that as much as we should. The other thing is even this interoperability post that I have posted on there. Rafael Bechner, he is from the Instituto de Lisboa. he had, he was doing a lot of the work on behalf of his PhD program at the Instituto de Lisboa, and we have a couple of others that have come through that. But I love it. I agree, and we're definitely going to be focusing on that as well.
Magno is being humble. Actually, he works in the biggest Brazilian company, Petrobras, and he's such a skilled guy in Hyperledger Fabric.
Oh no,
froze.
He presented. One of the Brazilian.
Marcus, you froze.
Oh, really? I froze. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can.
Am I frozen, or is everybody? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yeah.
It froze for a minute, but I hear you now.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So I'll continue. Magno has presented at Hyperledger Global Forum, one of the Brazilians that has presented. So it's really nice to have him with us as well. Can you hear me? Or
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I have to address a question. Actually a topic about interoperability. We have been seeing something about Cactus and also some issues about interoperability between Fabric and Ethereum. I'd like you to give us your thoughts about this topic.
Well, it depends on what you mean by interoperability, right? So what I would recommend, and I know we're at the top of the hour, so I want to be respectful for everybody. We will be dedicating a lot of time and resources from a strategic perspective around interoperability. Hart Montgomery, who I just mentioned, is our new CTO, is actually one of the maintainers and contributors to Hyperledger Cactus. And he wrote that article that you have, he wrote in coordination with the other maintainers. So I would love to actually maybe we can get on the agenda for a follow-up with the Brazilian regional meetup around interoperability. And maybe, David, this is something we all, we do for all the regional meetups, if we do it at the same time. I know sometimes the regional times are a little bit hard.
Time zones are hard, but some, I mean, some are closer to others. LATAM one.
It's a topic that keeps, coming up, and Hart will be happy to do a session on that. I just did one yesterday with him for one of our Chinese community.
That's a good point, though, about maybe scheduling some meetups.
Yeah.
But we are starting to see some of the projects that we've mentioned. For example, we have seen a couple examples of Weaver being used with Fabric. Weaver is a Hyperledger lab, along with Besu together. And so there's some early examples of that, especially in the digital currency space. Fabric already does support a lot of the ERC tokens. But there's still a lot more work, I think, that we'll see coming this year on that.
All right. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. Once again, I really appreciate your time and your knowledge sharing with our community right now. Thank you so much, Daniela. I also appreciate all the time from Carinho Tony that's been helping us so much for all this time. And of course, my friend here, Renato Teixeira, without him, nothing of this would be possible. And David Boas as well, that helps us all this time with all the support that has been done for our community. Thank you so much again.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Muito obrigado, Renato.
Thanks, everyone.
Todos vocês. Obrigado. Send me an email if you want to get in touch with me. I'm happy to talk to anybody. Muito obrigado. Boa noite.
Boa noite. Tchau, tchau.
Boa noite.